Well, good morning. I make it 11:30, so welcome to our webinar this morning, which is being hosted by partner Alan Stechler. So good morning to you. As you can see, we're joined by a number of our clients this morning for what I hope is going to be an interesting debate about the challenges really, and perhaps the opportunities that as business owners we all face at the moment, particularly in light of some of the announcements that were made over the weekend. There is the opportunity in this webinar for everybody in the audience to ask our panel their questions. If you're familiar with Zoom, you'll be familiar with the Q&A tool. If you're not, you can see the Q&A icon on your toolbar. If you click on that, that gives you the ability to be able to ask your questions as we go along, and we'll try and answer as many of them before we get to the end of our session today. So I will now hand over to Alan, and I look forward to hearing what everybody's got to say. Over to you.
Jo, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. As Jo said, my name's Alan Stechler. I'm a senior partner at Grunberg & Co, Chartered Accountants. I'm delighted and privileged to welcome three established and experienced business owners to talk candidly about their experiences of surviving the challenges of coronavirus, and there have been many, the lessons they have learned, the difficulties they've had to overcome, and how they have adapted their models to try to survive, their plans for the future, and how they may have had to rescale their businesses and possibly work differently going forwards. I'll start by introducing Giles Gibbons. Giles is CEO and founder of Good Business, a strategy consultancy business that helps and advises companies to become more ethical and sustainable in their business practices. Giles is one of the leading thinkers on the evolving role of social entrepreneurism and how brands can create a stronger and fairer society for us all. Almost the past 25 years, Giles has advised some of the biggest name brands that we know, like Coca-Cola, Sky, Nike, McDonald's, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to name a few. He's advised them on strategies to create an impact for change and improvement. So Giles, welcome. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Matthew Anson. Matthew is co-founder of Jenny Packham, a world-famous top UK fashion designer and brand of wedding dresses, ready-to-wear, evening wear, established over 30 years ago. Favourite brand of the Duchess of Cambridge. Many actresses who have worn their designs include Jennifer Aniston, Keira Knightley, Kate Winslet. Their dresses have appeared in Bond films, and one of the most famous ones was this red, or should I say pomegranate coloured dress in the remake of Royale. Fashion is a very labour-intense and high-risk business to manage and maintain as a brand, and Jenny Packham is one business and brand which is carefully and efficiently managed by Matthew. It's also an industry that is having to become more sustainable too. So Matthew, welcome.
Thank you.
Thirdly, I'd like to introduce Harry Nugent. Harry is what I call a true entrepreneur in the sense of the word. For over 30 years, I cannot think of a business or industry that Harry has not exposed his talents to, ranging from promotional wear, clothing, software, IT, gastropubs, homeware, scientific or medical research, confectionery, property and building services, and the list continues, and having bought and sold a number of businesses on the way. So Harry, welcome. I've been provided with a number of questions actually previously, but throughout this session there'll be further questions, as Jo's mentioned, which you'll be able to use a Q&A bar for the panel from the audience, which I'll endeavour to capture as we go along throughout this session. So Matthew, if you don't mind, I will start with you, if that's okay. So we've had the initial shock many months back of the coronavirus, and so for you, what were the biggest challenges that you faced when we entered this lockdown in March?
I suppose the obvious for a brand like ours is that we are in the social occasion business, and it's diametrically opposed to a virus where you have to be socially distanced. In point of fact, it was a total dislocation of of the business right the way through the chain, from production, from design production through to retail, because effectively the more sort of traditional methods of selling were and have been, since I've been in business, face to face. It's all about service because of the level and price of the product. The customer in ready to wear required a sort of a good deal of service levied onto the product, but in bridal it's obvious that the brides were coming to appointments largely with friends and family. So all of that in an instant was stopped, and for good reason. So essentially I had to sort of, I suppose, adapt that triage method of trying to establish the sort of the vital functions of the business, and to sort of systematically go through them, prioritizing those things that needed to be done first. But it was, I would sort of, the analogy for me is that it would be rather like being in an airplane when the engines fail. You know, there are a number of things that you have to do, but it doesn't mean you've got all of the solutions, because the science is against you. So to that degree, we just had to do certain things like closing our retail store, because that was part of the lockdown. Beyond that, we had to really seriously consider the impacts that something as dramatic as a lockdown had. In our case, as with many fashion companies, it's because we had a spring-summer delivery just made before the lockdown. So the product had effectively been produced and delivered when it was stopped from selling. So I guess one of the most significant issues was that the creditor position was way in excess of the debtor position, because one then had to consider how long it would take for anyone to actually effectively sell it. So those were sort of the major issues.
Presumably you had to furlough staff?
I think almost immediately. I mean, in terms of the retail, there was no choice because the store had to close. We were not at the time working on an online model, because we preferred to work with Net-a-Porter for that. And we've since sort of come on stream very, very recently with Farfetch, which is another online model where you use your inventory on their site. So ultimately, yeah, we had to furlough a significant number of colleagues almost immediately, because there was in fact nothing much we could do.
Yeah, I'm sure. I was going to, and Giles, thank you, Matthew. I was going to ask you, Giles, what, obviously you had to close your office, and obviously staff had to work remotely. What was the greatest remote working challenge you had to deal with your team and your own clients? What were they? Are you on mute?
The worst thing possible, isn't it? Yeah, as a consultancy, I think, you know, obviously we were very lucky that we were able to sort of continue our operations even though we closed the office. And so I think we were less concerned about that on day one. But I think we had two major concerns going into it. One was we had a number of clients who were extremely exposed to the virus, namely Virgin Atlantic, you know, organizations like that, Heathrow, which we were delivering big contracts to. And, you know, they were in a big situation themselves, and therefore, was it likely that we were going to see the money continue to do the work, etc. And then I suppose, secondly, a sort of broader point, which is the work that we do for clients, as in helping them look at their sustainability strategies and delivery, is that still going to be relevant in a pandemic? Are companies going to want to continue to explore those themes? The former point sort of played out as we expected it, which is we lost those clients almost immediately, and, you know, went into you know, insolvency, contractual dealings with trying to get the money that they owed us, which were all quite annoying. The latter actually surprised us in that many of our clients actually wanted more help rather than less help in thinking about how they should respond in a societal way to things that were happening, and therefore actually, rather than us become less relevant, the pandemic actually helped us become more relevant. And so we were able to pick up some new contracts relatively quickly coming into the pandemic. So it was a sort of mixed picture for us. It was less about the operations and more about whether we were going to remain relevant as the world turned upside down.
Okay, interesting. So Harry, I'll turn to you. Obviously, there was a lot of government initiatives, some better than others, to help businesses, and there's always the criticism of government that they've not done enough with certain industries. But how helpful did you find the government support schemes were for you, and did they actually make a difference to you?
Okay, so as you said at the start, I've got many businesses, so diverse being the big thing. So one of the things, I've got a recruitment company. Pretty much day one, we pretty much closed up, and we had no business, no revenue stream, and that's still closed today in the sense of we're open for business, but we're not trading, and all the staff are still on furlough. We then got a confectionery company. The problem there became that, we had no clients. Our big clients are people like Harry Potter, who are shut. Pretty much most of the high street shut, so we've got no revenue streams. So as we sit today, the only revenue streams we've got there are via online and some export. And with that business, we took a CBILS loan, and we have been using furlough to resource that business. And hopefully, we're sort of anticipating that probably will kickstart again, probably more like March next year. We don't see that it's probably going to. I mean, we've lost pretty much 90% of our turnover on that business overnight. So since March, we've literally lost a vast amount of turnover. So fortunately, we had cash in the bank, but obviously that's been used up, and that's why we've had to resource the CBILS loan. But then you move on to other businesses. So the medical business that we've got, in some respects, it went very quiet at the start. We wondered whether anyone was going to be coming to talk to us, but strangely enough, since, especially in the last 2 or 3 months, that business supplies across the world, and we've got New Zealand, Australia, Costa Rica, America, Russia, France, Belgium. I mean, it's just really odd that we're getting these array of different people coming to us. We haven't resourced any funding from the government with that business, so we've managed to sort of stay alive on our own. But we did actually take a different type of loan, which is like a repayment loan, which is a government-backed funded one for expansion on a British company that's a manufacturer, which we are. So we didn't use the bounce or the CBILS or the furlough. We just took this one-off loan that's going to we have to pay back within 2 years. What other businesses? I'm sure one of our other businesses is mechanical handling, but it's a bit of a strange animal. We do behind retail racking, very lightweight specialist racking, so it's not heavy, cumbersome, and that again at the start was very quiet, but in the last 3 months we've never been so busy. It appears that for some reason the client base we have, which are pretty blue chip, all seem to be getting back to work and saying, right, there's a future here, and so we're doing quite a lot of business there. The other part of that business, we make stair climbers, which means that all the online delivery people like Asda, Tesco's, Ocado, they've got the green totes that they need to get upstairs into flats, into masonettes, and obviously there's a certain amount of weight that people are allowed to pick up. So normally people are using sack barrows, and we've developed over the last 3-4 years a machine that will take up to 150. Well, no, actually we do bigger machines to do, but generally on the online delivery, 150 kilos upstairs, and we're trialing with, I say, all the big people at the moment, with them all of a view of obviously them saving time, saving money to do more deliveries in a day. So we sort of see that expansion's going to happen there. And again, we took a CBILS loan, and we've been using furlough to help that business. The biggest challenge I would say in this whole thing has been staff and management of them and their expectations and their view about the owner of the business. The owner is always okay and can afford to substantiate any problems. And why aren't they being paid, and why are they on furlough, and why can't we pay them 100%? We did pay some of our staff 100%, but after it went past 3 months, we decided to drop it down. We took a backlash and a real beating off some of the staff because they felt that was very unfair. We should have at the start not done that, but we did, and we took it the wrong way for doing it. But now we've moved on, and I think people are accepting the way things are. But I think there's a big challenge ahead into the new year of how we all deal with this.
No, definitely, and I think also as well, I suppose maybe people did predict it was going to go on for a long time, but I think generally people thought maybe by now things would return to some form of normality or a new normality, and obviously we're far from it, and we almost feel like we've gone backwards, and we've obviously with the changes that happened this weekend, and I think that it's made us all rethink and kind of just live in hope that things will change for the good in the new year, but it'll take quite some time. So obviously we're all in this kind of phase where we've had to change how we've done things. Some of our businesses aren't going to survive, some will survive differently. Matthew, turning to you in terms of, obviously you've had to rethink how you've had to run your own business model. Presumably that's taken a lot of input and a lot of thought. And
I think it probably, if I was honest, it changes you. It has, I suppose. I wouldn't go into the detail now, but there's a profound difference because what you had as a kind of psyche for so many years was an investment in something. If you couldn't move forward, at least your thought processes were about moving forward. And for us, for example, how we could develop a business in the Far East prior to this, and how long that would take and all these things. And then pretty much overnight, it became a business of subsidy, which, Giles and Harry have sort of alluded to some extent. And so you're literally sort of turning from one business model to another, which slightly paradoxically is almost like from a capitalist or free market to a form of socialism, where we aren't here but for the intervention of the government. It doesn't mean that we've sat back and done nothing. There have been so many things. The core issue for anyone, and it's actually not tenable for a number of companies, is how quickly on a contraction of sales can you contract your overhead. So some of them are directly related to your sales, but a number of them, and I mean, interestingly enough, Alan, you'll know this, is your fixed overheads, like your offices. So the businesses that I know of in our business were in conversation almost immediately with all the creditors. A number of those, like our factories, like our sort of couriers, appreciated the fact that overnight, whatever we had delivered would not be sold. And the question then was, well, how long would that take to resolve? Now, from our point of view, I think I immediately thought of about a 2-year process, and the question was, would our backers, our bank, because we don't have backers, but we work with the bank, would they be able to support a kind of contraction that would last pretty much 8 to 12 months in order to achieve? There are things that you would do fairly immediately. For us, for example, we have a showroom in Paris, but nobody's traveling, so we weren't incurring costs there, but we moved on to a Zoom platform, like most companies, to sell our goods. We did lookbook shoots, we did videos to accompany that, so that the customers would be able to get as much of a feel for the product as possible. But a number of those things were sort of resolvable quite quickly. But the fact was, I had to sort of call it in a way, how fast and how rapid was that contraction. And as Harry said, that some of his business were 90% down. I called it at the time about 55%. We have a spread of customers from the Far East through to the US. We're not, I would say, particularly exposed in Europe. So we saw a certain increase in business from the Far East, it would appear, because of the way they were overcoming the virus. And we saw a contraction in the US. So in a sense, we were trying to balance it, but in all honesty, you can't really work that quickly on such a complex model, because we're also reliant on the factories being able to stay open when they're under the same kind of restrictions as everybody else. So, you know, I think it goes on. I'm not here today saying we're securing at all. In fact, because of the weekend, like everybody, we're sort of now challenged to come up with decisions very quickly for the best part of a month. But I personally doubt that we will all be back in December. So we're sort of reliant on this sort of business that we have, plus whatever the government is going to do next. And we're all of us thinking, well, okay, since March, what would we have done, or what could we have done better? But I would say that the shame of it is that the lockdown didn't come as a surprise to us. And in fact, our retail business in the store in Mayfair was more or less online anyway, because our customers, who are largely from abroad, who travel into London, were contacting our colleagues in store, and we were shipping out. So it became a fulfillment center.
I have to say, for online businesses, obviously there's been several opportunities. I was going to say to you, Giles, can you think of, from your point of view, business positives that have come out of this pandemic? You know, obviously there's been a lot of negatives. There's been a lot of social issues, business issues, but in terms of...
Yeah, I mean, I think that we, very early on, I made a sort of commitment to the team that my first objective was to ensure that the whole team could stay together and come out the other side of this pandemic. And I asked, including myself, to take a pay cut to sort of help us through in that process. You know, you were very helpful in sort of thinking that through. And as the sort of the business came back and that we sort of it settled, we were able to sort of go back up to full salary for people. And what was interesting, I think, within that is that the team really gelled and came together around the sort of short-term mission of wanting to stay together as a team and to support each other. And I think there's been a very strong sense of having each other's back during the period, which has been really nice to see and sort of coming through. So considering we're not spending a huge amount of time together, I think that the strength and the sort of the motivation of the team has been one of the sort of positives. I think that the negative is that as time has gone on, curiously, I think that we are more efficient administratively, but we're less creative in delivery and solutions. And I think what I've been trying to talk to the team about is, don't try and get together when you've got a meeting. Try and spend time together when you don't have a meeting, because it's the bit between the sort of, when you've got a clear objective, you can work remotely and you can, you know, we've got a meeting tomorrow, we can do that meeting tomorrow. We don't really need to be in person. The bit that we're missing is the bit that I think we all get when we're working together in an office in London, and that you're sort of seeing things and hearing things. And it's that combination of things which helps them be better employees and come up with better solutions. And I think as time has gone on, particularly as we're moving into lockdown 2, I'm noticing how much harder it is for us to be good at what we're doing, in a sense. And I think we've got to really think hard, accepting that this is going to keep on going, on how we remain good at what we do, because I don't think that will come naturally.
Listen, we're human beings, and we are supposed to be, you know, interacting, communicating with each other. I think that's a big issue with a lockdown. And I'm sure in your type of business, when you're looking to come up with ideas and brainstorming and having people in a room together must make a big difference than everyone being remote. No, I understand what you're saying. So Harry, from your point of view, I mean, obviously, because you've had to change the way you've done things, I mean, do you feel that you've moved totally away from like pre-COVID-19 methods? Do you feel that it's almost like you've had a complete rethink of everything?
Yeah, I think we've had to rethink everything. I mean, at the moment, I'm sitting in a 50,000 square foot building. In 2 months' time, our lease ends and I'm moving out of it. We're not going back into a 50,000 square foot building. We're going into smaller units. We'll be, not so much luxury with space. And I would say, well, we'll make do rather than there's a luxury of we're going to grow into it. But in the same vein, I am buying a building that we've committed to buy for one of our businesses. So I'm still looking at the future rather than sitting back and worrying and thinking, well, there's no future here. So I've always been the same, as you know. I'm always positive thinking, and there's something around the corner tomorrow. But it has changed my mindset. I think I do struggle that I think companies are using the COVID excuse. So we ring up and we're looking for supplies or that, and people are saying, "Oh, we'll get back to you," and then we wait and we wait and we wait, and then nothing happens, and then you have to chase, and people say, "Oh, no one's available." And I'm thinking, where's this all going wrong? I mean, come on, we've got to get back to some sort of normality. And I've tried to buy new cars and new vans in the last 3 months, and I've been shocked how people don't even come back to you. Just like, I want to place an order, I want to buy something, and no one comes back to you. So I think from my point of view, there's an opportunity. I think I've always been positive. I always think positive, and I get up and think, right, you hit a brick wall, well, let's climb over it. And I think we just got to think outside the box. And what I've started to do is, as you say, look at every business. We've made redundancies. We've looked at certain staff who are in the offices and thinking, we don't actually need you, I'm sorry. And we've had to do it. But what it's made us all do is sit down with the staff that have left and said, right, we're going to get through this. And when we get through this, we're going to have better times. And hopefully we can rethink how you can earn more rather than the problem of earning less. So I don't know. I mean, everyone's got to have a different view about how they run their business, but it's difficult times when you've got to make difficult decisions. And I think more importantly, if we're the owners and we're the people that have started these businesses, we grew them from nothing normally. So you know what to do. You just got to do it again and do it in a different way.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think all three of you are experienced, driven business owners and driven by your own strong personalities, which probably come out in these situations of crisis, because obviously you have to make big decisions. Something I'm going to ask all three of you, actually, because I think Giles has slightly touched on it, was, how have you sort of, in this whole period, managed to deal with sort of the well-being of staff and their mental health, which obviously is a big issue. I mean, obviously in the summer the weather was nicer. We had a lockdown, and people got more positive. Now we've got the grey November early evenings and very wet. How do you keep staff motivated? How do you keep? What have you done, Matthew? What sort of suggestions can you give to us?
Because it was relevant to the business you're in, right? So there is a phased approach to the business. In effect, I remember saying to our bank manager that the first phase was like Apollo 13, the dark side of the moon. The question of how could you operate when in fact there was very little to operate on, and in that period, for a company like ours, there was a significant number of colleagues on furlough. So what was required in that sense was to understand in the phasing of returning to work what phases would be required and when. I mean, for us, it's product. For all the things around fashion, the way you sell it, catwalk shows, etc. A lot of it just was switched off. There were some sustainable arguments around the fashion business anyway, and how we all travel around the world and we all watch catwalk shows for 15 minutes and then the product is, repeated time and time again, and what's the point of that? But I think the issue that we had, if I was honest, was that our colleagues, I think, were in a slight sense of shock. that, you know, this industry that to an extent has a history of working all hours, which I must say I don't subscribe to, because I think that is just essentially thinning out your hourly rate. Yeah, it is, I'm sad to say, an industry that would rely on youth to work throughout the night because the shows are a deadline. You know, there's all that kind of element to our industry. So we sort of had to, in a sense, make sure people were furloughed. And a few colleagues wrote saying thank you very much because they'd recently joined the business and they were very concerned that they wouldn't qualify. I think to a large extent it was then looking at who needed to return and when. There was effectively a core of 5 people that ran the business from when we went into lockdown, which was on the 13th, because the government went on the 21st. And then it was just a question of saying at what points, because very clearly there is seasons and we would have to have product ready for those seasons. At what points would we need to do that element of the business? When would the collection need to be made? When would we sell it? And of course, we needed colleagues to communicate constantly with our customers and our factories to make sure that if we said, yes, we'll start selling at this date, we would actually have something to sell. So it was very, very interesting that for, I don't know, from the middle of March through to May, a number of colleagues, and because the weather was so good, I have to say, a number of colleagues who are, you know, as a group, very friendly with each other, I think got through quite well. But the question for us, actually, from March, when you think of the dates, for me, the question was, whatever we came back to, we were selling a product we'd already developed prior to March. The key to our business was what would happen in September when we sold new product that would be delivered in the new year, in February. That was an absolute key to what we did next. So in every model that we had to sort of build in a factor of probably 8 weeks in order to maybe make a big decision relative to what happens. So it's more like a video game, I should say, yeah? It just came at you and you kept trying to navigate your way through, hoping that you didn't get literally taken out by it. So on that basis, the people became more anxious the more this went on, the more it became apparent that the news around them wasn't the best. You know, Debenhams, I know it's not our business, but we have a license with them. They went into receivership in April. I think those sorts of things were the biggest issue for our colleagues, because although they were reliant on what we were doing, there was a bigger picture there that wasn't looking particularly good long term. And that's been, I suppose, quite genuinely, emotionally, the hardest thing to deal with, because you as a CEO, you do a job as a CEO. Whatever the job is, it will depend. And I take Giles's point about consolidating the team. With us, it was isolating the team into the skill sets that were required to produce a collection at a given date, and then sell it. And many other things around that couldn't continue.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. So Giles, you probably felt that you maybe had a sort of an easier process trying to sort of deal with stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, I've run a number of other organisations,
correct,
and they've one in the hospitality sector, which has fared incredibly badly. So I've sort of felt on both sides, you know, pain of things that you've been talking about. But specifically to the mental health thing, because I think this is really important. I think it's worth splitting mental health into sort of 2 things, what I'd call hard factors and soft factors. The hard factors is that I felt that the most important thing that I could do was provide reassurance in an unreassuring world, and that where possible, I felt that if I could sort of provide a sort of sturdy base and a commitment to them, that they would then be able to sort of build on that. So first and foremost, you can do nice things, but you need to do the hard stuff first, which is what was I prepared to do on their behalf in order to get through. And we did that quite early on. And then we did lots of soft factors around that. In that I have a call every morning with everyone in the team where we get together and everyone talks about what's needed in the day. We do, we have sort of Friday sharing sessions. We do a bake-off, weekly bake-off thing. So there's lots of things to sort of bring everyone together in different forms in order to sort of keep us connected. But I think that those, whilst they're important, I think they're not as important as the fundamental, which is how can you provide any more reassurance than they are getting from what they're hearing in the news when they go to bed at 10:30? Is like, what can you do to help them override the worry that they're hearing relentlessly in the news? Sure.
Now I can imagine the events of this weekend. It's obviously has made people step back a few steps, and I think that's been very difficult mentally. And Harry, I was going to turn to you, not so much on that, but actually sort of looking at, obviously there's so much uncertainty in terms of how long this is going to last, and even if there'll be a proper vaccine, if there's one that will work, and in terms of sort of what advice and sort of like solutions do you feel that you can give people running businesses as what are the key things they should be doing now going forwards? Obviously varies in the type of business the person has, but so what sort of ideas and solutions can you sort of share?
I think
because you've always got ideas and solutions.
Well, yeah, I think the problem is as an entrepreneur, you get up every morning with these bubbles, and they appear. But I think, look, fundamentals of most businesses are driven by cash flow. And sales and communication. And I think, look, no doubt most of us have had to talk to people that we wouldn't normally talk to on a regular basis. So, like the bank managers that you might know them, but you don't actually speak to them. In this last sort of 6 or 9 months, maybe we've all had to pick the phone up and have that chat. And I think, Alan, you got involved in one situation with one of the big four where, we hadn't spoke to a bank manager in 15 years. And by a bit of communication, I've next minute got a director talking to me, next minute got a regional group of 5 people all wanting to appear at my office. And, the one thing that came out of it was them not doing their job properly as a bank, saying, well, we just get stuck in a rut, and obviously we've got so many accounts. And I said, well, if I treated my customers like that, but communication is important and cash flow. I mean, look, I'm doing cash flows daily and weekly. So, I know what's coming around the corner. I'm adjusting the cash flows to make sure that, even the businesses that I'm saying, oh yeah, they're okay, I'm still looking and saying, well, what happens if? So I can make sure that if the if happens, what do? Do I have to put my hand in my pocket, or will the bank support me? And the bank will only support if they can see that I'm doing everything I can to make sure the business will survive. In terms of, like I said, myself, I'm always pushing forward. I'm always looking for new things to add to the business, and that's never going to stop. But I mean, the problem is sometimes it's when you're in the thick of it, it's where do you turn to? And sometimes it's talking to someone else. I've got friends in business, and one of them's in not construction, but he supplies this construction industry with what they call welfare units. And his business is flying because normally you're only allowed 4 people in a welfare unit. Well, now they're saying you can only have 2. So his business is literally doubled overnight, and HS2 is about to start, and they need these welfare units because basically the government says you must have them. So overnight, his business he can't cope. And so when you start looking at a business like that, how do you plan? The planning becomes a different thing because, as he said, you've got to fund it, you've got to be paid, you've got to keep your suppliers happy, and you've got to make sure you get the product out the door that's going to last. Otherwise, people are going to return things. So strategically, we've all got different challenges. Manufacturing brings you one. Sales, if you're just a sales opportunity, is another, because motivation is a big thing to keep people motivated. And I think it is, as I say, strategically for me, cash is king. And I constantly look cash, and now I'm looking past Christmas because I think we're going to have a bit of a difficult time the first 3 months of next year. So I'm sort of saying to myself, right, if that happens, what does that mean in terms of cash, and what do I need to survive in that period? But I'm sure every business will be different, because sometimes you have what they call a Christmas tree business, which is really busy up till Christmas, and then it's quiet through till June. It's seasonal businesses at difficult times, and these are different and difficult times. But I think if you can have your, like most of us are saying, you need your staff to support you through this as much as you supporting them. And I have found that one a challenging one out of all of them.
You mean in terms of motivating the staff, in terms of keeping
motivating the staff, but also them understanding that
reality.
Actually, this is not my doing. You know, I mean, even after the weekend, I was having people on Monday saying, "What does all this mean?" I said, "Well, the government are extending the furlough. What does that mean?" And I thought, surely it's straightforward, but to most people, it's not. And I think managing staff has been quite hard work, difficult at times. And maybe this is the problem when you're running your own business. You think everyone should think the same as you.
Absolutely, that's always a problem. And Matthew, turning to you in terms of what sort of ideas and advice can you give business owners, and sort of maybe not all the solutions, but some ideas and solutions.
I know that's the point of this, far be it from me. I think communication. I have very strenuously kept a dialogue with the banks for many years, and I have experienced very different reactions to it, and the banks have changed as well. But I cannot stress in our case the strength of the dialogue with the bank, whether the news is good or not good, has been pivotal. Like Harry, we did get a CBILS loan fairly early on. I subsequently found out with you, Alan, how other companies weren't finding it quite as straightforward. And I think at that point, it significantly changed strangely enough, the personal relationship, including Jenny, I'd have to say, because in a sense, we have designated certain areas of work over these years. We're involved in both, but, you know, finance has been a significant part of my life. And I think that was a very profound change, actually, because even the way we discuss things is like today on Zoom. So we're in each other's homes almost, you know. I mean, I'm in the office, but I can't stress enough how much the detail has mattered in all of this, because, again, Harry was pointing out the cash flows. Well, my cash flows in March are almost, they should be in a museum now, because they're hilarious. They have no bearing on what is now relevant to the company. But I guess you have to face everything on the same footing. So whatever is bad or whatever is good, you just have to list it, do it. Certain things will go okay, certain things will not. I think to Harry's point about people understanding, I mean, it's wider than simply one's own team, but you get some responses that are absolutely marvelous, and the connection with you and your suppliers or your colleagues is terrific, and the converse is true. But if it's balanced out, I think it gets you through. But every day at the moment is the equivalent, I guess, of a month in a funny way. The bank themselves said that it's not about balance sheet lending anymore; it's about cash. So the whole kind of dialogue and the relationships that we have changed. But all of these components of this business really demand is that you communicate, good or bad, you communicate. And I guess in a more pragmatic approach to your creditors, if they think, in a sense, if we take this further, like if they were to use the legal situations, they're probably likely not to get paid at all. So I sense that we're all aware of this in what I'm doing, and we don't say it, but we know that underlying it, we're just trying to tread very carefully at the moment. And if you give confidence by, in this case, sending payments of any sort regularly, clearly you're in a lot better position than if you ignore it. And I suppose that's all common sense, but it does actually come down to that.
Absolutely, thank you. Now, it's highlighted, I suppose, as you both said about, cash is king, having the cash flow, and also communication. Obviously, Giles, obviously, one of your strengths obviously is communication. Obviously, I suppose you've obviously been presumably practicing what you preach.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of reflecting on what Matthew was saying there. I mean, I think everybody pointing in the same direction helps, whether it's good or bad, us get to a point. And I suppose I see our role as sort of leaders in the business of sort of taking all the stakeholders with us, in a sense, and them all knowing where we're all at, and so that each one is playing its part, and it's when one bit of that falls away that the problems really start to sort of mount up. So I've certainly, I think, learned to just communicate even more with everybody, clients, staff, you name it, the bank, etc., your team, so that everyone sort of is clear about where we're at, and at least feels that that they're sort of part of the direction of travel that we're going. I think that the thing that I found really difficult is sort of planning for for next year's budget, and how possibly we can sort of put numbers on a page when we just have no idea, where it might be or what we might be doing, and therefore, rather than sort of make numbers up, we've really tried to make much shorter term planning horizons. Sure. So we're really only looking 3 months ahead, which I know is probably not the best thing to do, but at least we can be clearer about the shorter term than the longer term. So I think that's been sort of quite helpful in giving us the sort of the decision-making criteria in order to sort of move forward within that.
That's good. I mean, any of you can answer this one, but if you were not, so you'd actually want the job, but if you were Boris Johnson, what do you think he should be doing now, and what trick is he missing that he could perhaps help businesses going forwards? Because obviously the government have done a lot, but for some people not enough. And what would you do if you were in his position? So I'll open it to any of you who'd like to answer that one.
Shall I go?
Yes, Matthew, you can go.
Well, it wasn't necessarily the Boris, what would you do in the position? A few weeks ago, I was listening on the radio, and I'm sorry I've forgotten the guy's name, but it could be Jim O'Neill. And I think he has been a minister and he's advised the government. He was putting a slightly different spin on the whole idea of furlough. So in essence, I'm not sure that this was ever practical, but if someone in our situation had a direct dialogue of any sort, whether it be locally or nationally, I would have said that the best I could provide would be a forecast for probably the next 2 years. And I would have said that I think that the effect on the business was going to be dramatic. And therefore, I wouldn't be able to operate at the same level, and I'd need to do things that we wouldn't necessarily want to do, but we would have to do. Now, the point there is, if someone had said, well, if we gave you the funds to get through 2 years, how well do you think you'd do, right? Now, I wouldn't want to qualify because we, plus 30 years in this job, but it would be probably helpful to realize the experience that so many business owners, business runners have, and how perhaps it's not as corrupt as some articles that you read. And I would have been very happy to have engaged in the process of saying, okay, I can't keep everything and I cannot guarantee everybody's wage. But what I can do is present a plan for at least 2 years that I think would be effective enough to maintain a business for at a point there is an upswing, And the reason I say 2 years is because if you haven't come up with a solution by 2 years, the world is a very different place in any case. And I'm not saying that it's a vaccine-related solution. It's actually the way in which we live our lives, which is kind of in a free market economy where we get the online sales versus retail. And now we're having an argument politically whether certain aisles of a supermarket should be shut because they're non-essential and they're compromising the businesses that other retailers have had, right? So we have Amazon. It's an absolute behemoth. It's set to grow. There will be others in that market. In the free market, that's how business changes, right? But when you come to an airline, we are not, you will at some point need an airline. It isn't a free market economy that says, okay, those airlines that can't afford to run right now, we'll just have to let them go, because in fact, I would believe that most nations need a national carrier. For example, at some point, we will need to revert back to flying each other. But so in a microcosm of a business, and where essentially SMEs are a very big contributor to the economy, we probably had enough experience in most cases and the ability to present something whereby we managed it. The issue there was trust. Now, paralleling that, if the trust was that we all needed to come to an office to see how much work we did, I think the evidence now suggests if you work at home, in many cases, you actually do more, and to some extent, you manage your own time. We're grown-ups. So that's just something that I think, picking up on this article I heard on the news, is something that I found quite interesting and would have been happy to sort of develop that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just very quickly, Charles, I think you do.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is I feel, you know, in a sense, Boris is the chief executive of UK PLC, in a sense, right? And therefore, I would ask him to try and do what I think all leaders of businesses should do, which is to provide certainty in order that people can then bounce off that and do what they can do within the walls of certainty. And I feel that what he's failed in the last couple of months to do is sort of bring people with him when we knew there was going to be a second lockdown, the second wave. They should have been so much more prepared. And it feels like the sort of what he was forgiven for last time, he is not being forgiven for this time. And I think my challenge would be that they should have been better prepared in order to provide the certainty that was needed in order to enable us to get on and do the best we can do in the context of it. And I think he's on the back foot, and that's a shame because I don't think he needed to be.
No, thank you. And finally, Harry.
Well, I wouldn't want his job for no money. But I mean, look, I think I look at things and think, well, surely the government or Boris could have turned around and said, right, and I'm going to pick something really mad and say, you know, at the end of April, we are going to close the country, and I mean close the country completely for a month. And what I mean is don't let anyone in and out the country. I mean, I had people come in from abroad, from America, and I'm asking them what happened when they got to Heathrow, and they said, well, walk through customs. Why? I said, well, no, surely you must have had something, you know, someone tests whether you've got a temperature. He said, no, nothing. So the problem is, it was half measures. So obviously this whole thing has just gone on and on and on. And it would be easy for me to sit here and say, shut the country down, because of course you can do that. But there must have been a better way we could have done it. But like I said, I don't want his job. But really, this thing will carry on going until, and I don't mean to point the finger at younger people, but when you see what goes on in Newcastle, Liverpool on a Friday and Saturday night, 1,000 people out in the streets, well, surely, come on. But then perhaps when I was 18, 19, I was out on the streets and being mad. But surely people need to understand there's an epidemic here that needs to be controlled. But how we do it right now, I don't know.
I'll ask you again in a few months' time. Listen, I'm going to bring this to a close. I want to say a really big thank you to our panel, Giles, Matthew and Harry, for taking part and for providing really interesting insight into your experiences in business. following COVID, and obviously your plans and your ideas and suggestions and what you're doing now and going forward. So thank you very much, and thank you for the audience for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
See you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.